Let's start with the Throne of Glass through Air of Fire reference first. Word markings. So on the cottage for Feyre's family, we get, quote, faded word markings etched around the threshold. Well, it doesn't really do anything for Timmy Tam. It does not do anything to help keep him out. But many people believe that this is a nod to word marks or even actual word marks from the Throne of Glass series. And this is not the last word marks nod we will get in the ACOTAR world. We also get a mention of iron. And something I find really interesting is the difference of iron in the ACOTAR world versus the Throne of Glass world. In ACOTAR, iron doesn't do diddly squat against these fairies, but it's a big rumor among humans that iron will defend against them. Like Lexi said, both Elaine and Nesta have iron on their person when they go into town. Isaac has an iron cuff. Elaine will eventually have an iron engagement ring. Yikes. But we later learn from Tamlin and Lucian that iron doesn't do anything against fairies, which is odd because in Throne of Glass, we learned that iron diminishes the fairy magic. But we know from Crescent City that the Tog Fae and the ACOTAR Fae are two different types of Fae. So perhaps the iron only works for that one type, but then it brings into the conversation, do we believe that someone from the Throne of Glass world is a world walker and brought the rumor about iron working against fairies into the ACOTAR human lands, thinking that it was the same type of fairy? We don't know, but that's my guess. Nesta is described as a queen without a throne in these opening chapters. In Crescent City 3, when Bryce leaves Prythian for the last time, she gives Nesta the Star Sword, or Gwydion, as it's familiar in our ACOTAR world, saying basically, go figure out why the fucking 8-pointed star was tattooed on your back. While it's theorized that Elaine will become High Lady of the Spring Court, just like Feyre is the High Lady of the Night Court, it's also theorized that Nesta will become the High Lady of the resurrected Dusk Court, which we know the Dusk Court was on the same land that the prison is now on. The prison had an 8-pointed star on the floor when Nesta went to go and get the harp, which is one of the Dread Trove items. So it would make sense that if Nesta had this tattoo and Bryce was like, wink, wink, hint, hint, it sounds like you have some kind of connection to this Dusk Court nonsense, it might make sense that her and Cassian go off to resurrect this Dusk Court. First one is, as Feyre is walking around looking for Lucian, she feels like two someones are watching her. Quote, a faint sniff and a quiet giggle issued from far too close. The shimmering in the corner of my eye grew larger, separating into two small figures no taller than my waist. Some people believe that these are the little folk or fairies from the Throne of Glass world, who are the smaller cousins to the human-like fae. While their forms do vary, there are very specific ones who regularly watch Selena in the forest when she is on her way to the Glass Castle, and even leave her gifts later on in the series. It's not a direct one-to-one comparison, however, they are described as full of mischief in Tog, and curious and wanting to play in ACOTAR. So it is possible that these are two different types of species, but it's fun to think that they are the same ones, just in different universes.
Also, Tamlin inquires to Feyre, do you speak to mercenaries often? After last episode, a lot of people pointed out to us that the mercenary is a similar description to Fury ACOTAR from Crescent City. This is not the only mention to someone who could be Fury as we get into the ACOTAR books, but we are saving a big deep dive on Fury's potential presence in this world for a later episode. Before we get into the Pool of Starlight theories, I want to point out the small symbols that Feyre notices in the mural. They're part of the contents poured out from the cauldron, and she notes that perhaps there's some ancient fairy language. We learn from House of Flame and Shadow, I'm pausing real quick in case you need to jump off, okay, spoilers incoming, that Midgard and Prythian share the same ancient old fae language. When Bryce speaks it, Amarantha confirms it hasn't been heard in 15,000 years. I'm guessing this must be the ancient fae language from way back when in this world.
One thing I do want to say on that note, though, is there are a lot of crossover theories thinking that word marks and this same Midgard and Prythian ancient fae language are all the same ancient fae language.
Okay, we're going to summarize several Starlight crossover references and theories. Please do understand that we are only scratching the surface here because there are some deep rabbit holes. Let's look at Crescent City theories first. Number 1, this liquid starlight is a form of first light. Crescent City's Autumn King was researching a very similar liquid to the description we get of starlight. He was studying an iridescent liquid for, quote, how light moves through the world, how it can be shaped.
We do get confirmation that the Daglin in the ACOTAR world are indeed the Asteri in the Crescent City world. The Asteri fed off of first light, and we know that the Daglin drank liquid magic like wine. Put two and two together, the Daglin drank first light, aka what we call the pool of starlight here. So this pool of starlight, for lack of a better word, is left over from 15,000 years ago when the Daglin ruled. Or if we know that this starlight is first light, and we know that the High Lord's magic comes from the earth, does that mean on Calamite they're producing first light? Quite possibly, or shedding a tiny bit of it. Obviously, it's not like the drop at all, but Calamai could be their way of giving a little first light, aka starlight, back into the earth to keep the magic of the land flourishing. Now, theory number 2, connecting the Crescent City world, we're going back to the explanation of Tamlin and Rhys's sister being mates. Remember, the Night Court and the Spring Court are enemies, and they fought on opposite ends of the war. If Tamlin and Rhys's sister were mates, this alliance would have been seen as a threat, because this would have been joining two rival courts, very Romeo and Juliet. Side note, last episode we speculated why Tamlin doesn't use his shape-shifting to make wings. This might be one of the reasons why, because he was so pained by losing his mate. It would also make sense that Tamlin already had a mate, why he never mentioned him and Feyre having a mating bond. He never said that their mating bond would happen for them, and in fact, it's always Feyre who is wanting it to click into place or wondering when it'll click into place. Little does she know. Back to him and Rhys's sister being mates though. As a mating present, like Lexi said earlier, Tamlin could have received the pool of starlight from Rhys's sister, or also like Lexi mentioned earlier, Tamlin could have burned the wings here, and that's how the pool of starlight emerged. But Nicole, what does this have to do with CC spoilers? Well, because in CC3, when Selene appears in the prison, Azriel says, quote, "She looks like Rhysand's sister." Now, Selene wouldn't be Rhysand's sister per se. Those timelines definitely wouldn't match up, but Selene could definitely be a direct descendant. And Selene was a member of what family line? Yep, the Star-born Fae. So it could make sense that this direct descendant of the Star-born Fae was tied to this pool of starlight, whether it was a gift of her mate or her wings being burned on that site. Number 3, some wonder if the pool of starlight can seep into the ground and charge certain magical paths. Lexi mentioned earlier how it could be a portal, but let's tie it to both Throne of Glass and for Crescent City. For instance, the magical ley lines of Crescent City or Silba's tomb in the Torre Chesme from Tog would be of similar instances here. But in A Court of Silver Flames, Amren says about the Bog of Urid, quote, "They say the water there flows to under the mountain, and the creatures who live in the bog have long used its underground waterways to travel through the middle, even into the mountains of surrounding courts. So these waterways do exist in Prythian. But this type of source, almost, that first light-esque and feeding into the ground for the Daglin and the Asteri, it could have also been traveling under the waterways to the Hewn City, to whatever is under Ramiel, or to under the prison where one of the Asteris was waiting for 15,000 years, aka the remnants of the Dust Court."
And to keep it going here with Throne of Glass, there is a river in Empire of Storms where Aelin and the crew are on a boat and the caves were, quote, "filled with starlight." There could be very similar magic at play here, maybe not directly connected, but again, those same types of magic, same types of things in these different universes. There's also just the full-blown possibility that the pool of starlight is a word gate and portal into these other realms too, not just a portal between Prythian, but to these other realms as a whole.
Well, let us not forget that in Kingdom of Ash, Aelin is shooting across the night sky, across many different portals, and she is supposedly one of the spirits on Starfall. So Starfall, pool of starlight, she might have used that as a word. There could all be connected there. I don't know. So Feyre in her goodbye to Nesta says, quote, "There is a better world, Nesta. There's a better world out there waiting for you to find it." Oh, I'm getting chills. I couldn't help but read this and think of Nesta in chapter 100 of, Jesus Christ, it's a lot of chapters, of Crescent City 3. In one of her
I'm so glad we're not doing Crescent City.
Oh my God, can you imagine so many chapters? In one of the most heart-wrenching chapters of CC3, there's not a lot, so the bar is kind of low, but there's this one at least. Ember tells Nesta, quote, "You'll find your way." This feels so reminiscent of Feyre's goodbye to Nesta here in book 1 of ACOTAR, telling her there's a better world out there waiting for you to find it. But there's that extra element of, quote, waiting for you to find it. Let us not forget that Bryce's parting words to Nesta are, quote, I think that 8-pointed star was tattooed on you for a reason. Take that sword and go figure out why. There is a better world out there for Nesta to discover, Prithian, her mate. But what if this also includes the Dusk Court? Speaking of Nesta and the Dusk Court, we get a possible foreshadowing moment for her being a high lady or some element of power. Quote, there were no limits to what Nesta might do, what she might make for herself when she found a place to call her own. I prayed I would be lucky enough to see it someday. Don't like that foreshadowing with knowing her and Rhys's bond that they make at the end of ACOWAR. But this right here is just a blatant neon sign that, yes, she's going to make a place. She's going to find a family to call her own. You know, the found family trope is everywhere in Silver Flames. But a place to call her own might be a court to call her own.
There's a theory that Amarantha is Vog, and we'll explore this more in future books as we dissect the King of Hybern also being a possible Vog too, but of course we got to talk about Amarantha right here. While Amarantha is very powerful, I'd assume she would be a Vog princess and not a queen. Princesses are not as powerful as queens. I imagine the King of Hybern would be a Vog king in comparison. If you need a quick reminder, Vog are demons from another realm in the Throne of Glass series. They are powerful and malicious and can possess people by going inside the host bodies to control them. Vog princes, or princesses in this case, are especially cold and calculating. They delight in both emotional pain as well as physical torture. Hey, that sounds like our girl Amarantha, compared to the regular Vog, which are more like Vog royalties, I'll say henchmen. The Adder, speaking of henchmen, is a very similar description as the Ilken, which are huge demonic creatures with large wings and venomous claws. They are cronies of the Vog, so this would definitely fit for the Adder to be like an Ilken if Amarantha or Hybern are Vog.
So adders do live in the Aurelia world.
I have not finished the series and I do not know that.
Well, there you go.
Hybern's book does seem to be a wordmark book, so Amarantha may be using the Throne of Glass universe magic because, well, hey, they're crossovers. Amarantha, this is one of the biggest emphases of why people think that she is a Vog. She has black eyes, which is the signature trait of a Vog inside someone. So Amarantha may be Vog, specifically a princess because of how powerful she is.
Now, here's one thing I do want to say is that Amarantha's blood in the next stretch is not described as black, and that would be
Correct.
something definitely described. However, Maeve, who is a Vog queen, did trick Rowan and the fellow cadre into believing that she was not Vog and she was just totally normal by glamoring, for lack of a better term, glamoring her blood to appear normal. So this is not out of the question that magic does exist and that Amarantha could have done that. But what a time to do that is like, oh my God, my throat's being ripped out by a man-bear pig, but glamour.
Speaking of which, Amarantha isn't necessarily beheaded, which is one of the surefire ways to kill a Vog, which plus fire is another way. But her throat is literally ripped out by Tamlin, so I guess close enough. I will say this. I don't think Amarantha has enough of her own power to inflict onto others the way that the Vog easily can. She more so seems to use the high phase trapped powers against them to protect herself from them. But hey, I love this theory. I think it's fun and possible, especially with the whole like her red blood having to be glamored there. If she is a Vog, though, I'm going to go with no on the Tamlin is her mate theory. I don't think that both of them would be true if either one of them are true. Having Tamlin's mate be a Vog, that would be a real tough look for him, and I don't think that fits.
I would go more with she is using the magic of word marks and is not Vog.
Yes, me too.
Yeah, I think that would be more what I'd lean towards. An old name from one of our earlier dialects. What earlier dialects? Could this be a Prithian version of the old language? Or could this be the language that Amren mentions in the Book of Breathings, like I mentioned earlier, aka the language of Bryce's tattoo, aka word marks? I doubt it, just because word marks are so unique and like how they're described and how, and like especially with the Book of Breathings, like it's possible, but I doubt it. I think it's more likely that this old language is closer to Rowan's tattoo, which is in a script of an old language, specifically not stated as word marks.
I agree with that, especially with saying earlier dialects. I don't think that is the old Fae language that hasn't been spoken in 15,000 years. Like that shocked Amaranth.
Yeah.
So I don't think that this would be just casually tossed around in this way. So I do think that it is more so just one of their older dialects. And it plays a lot more into Feyre's heritage versus the multiverse there.
Agreed. I do love the idea that it's in the same or similar language as Rowan's tattoos. I want to learn more.
I hadn't thought about it that way. I love that so much. Yes,
love you, Rowan. You beautiful silver-haired man. Lady of Autumn. We gotta talk about her. So it is interesting that we never learn the Lady of Autumn's name, like I mentioned in the deep dive. But like most questions, I went to Reddit. And Kara Auden had an interesting post about this, wondering if after we learned about her affair with Helion, Baron pulled some Tog magic using a similar spell that was put on the King of Otterland, aka Dorian I, and made to forget their name and identity. Personally, I am leaning away from this theory because of how she is still so connected emotionally to Lucian and wanting to save him. And we saw what happened to Daddy-O Dorian. He didn't give a flying fuck about baby Dorian. But on this thread, Nate Translates had a different take, wondering if her name is instead more of a connection to the Autumn King or Rune Danon's line. Since we know his line of Fae is from the Prythian world, this would not be out of the question if they are related. Now, Rune looking just like Rhys is where I have some raised eyebrows on that, but I just found it interesting, the idea that Lady of Autumn's name could be connected to these other worlds as well. Next, the Midgard worm being from Midgard, ? Because of the portals in these worlds, it is not out of the question that the Midgard worm is from Crescent City's Midgard.
Bryce even asks if they came from her world originally, and I quote, horrific as the creature was, to have another being from her world here was oddly comforting. That's a Bryce reaction, to say the least.
That's a Bryce Crescent City 3 reaction, to say the least.
Yeah. Then Nesta goes on to be like, I don't fucking know. Like, how would I know? She doesn't even know that Bryce's world existed a week ago. Of course she doesn't know. And I love how Nesta goes on to confirm that the Midgard worms aren't common, but she mentions how Feyre defeated one. I absolutely loved seeing this on the page when I was reading House of Flame and Shadow, tying us right back to this first book and Feyre's first task going up against one. And Nesta's like, dang, I thought she exaggerated the painting, but nope, that thing is as terrifying as she depicted. What a sisterly reaction right there. But just in general, we get a Midgard worm in both books. Granted, it's in the same world that they occur, but it was nice to see the Alaskan bullworm again in House of Flame and Shadow.
And just a quick note to kind of even more so separate these. Midgard in Norse, in Old Norse, means Middle Earth, and midden, as in the first part of Midgard worm, in Old Norse means manure pile. And in Norse, dragons are typically depicted as worms and stated as such, but it's typically spelled W-O-R-M. So if we're really translating this word for, like, basically word for word, in Old Norse, Midgard worm means manure pile dragon. So I do not think that they are connected.
This next crossover call out is actually in reference to our Under the Mountain surreal segment, after highlighting the sacred mountain in the middle. While under the mountain, Feyre notices carvings on the walls that depicted fairies and high fae and animals in various environments and states of movement. They're described as stories of Prythian. You know where else we've seen these stories of a land? Let's go back to House of Flame and Shadow with Vesperus, one of the Daglin, and the only one left behind after the rest were defeated and forced to flee Prythian. This is the one Bryce stupidly frees and Nesta has to kill. I know Nicole's like, don't you dare get on this high horse right now. We don't have time for that. Go listen to our CC3 reactions video.
Or our interview with Daniel where he just goes off on this book.
Vesperus and the rest of the Daglin had hidden a pool of their magic under, quote, every sacred mountain. Amarantha's court under the mountain is literally under one of Prithian's sacred mountains, so we can infer that the Daglin hid one of their magical pools in this sacred mountain. We see more of these kind of carvings in the caves in part 1 of House of Flame and Shadow when Azriel, Bryce, and Nesta are heading towards the prison and encounter Vesperus. The carvings show warnings of booby traps and tell stories of great fate battles, lovemaking, and childbirth, a masked queen, and a crown on her head, bearing instruments in her hand. Hello, dread troves. They are also in a sacred mountain at the time. And then there are also these carvings in Avalon's caves, called the Cave of Princes or Helena's Cave. Remember that Avalon is considered a thin place, which makes it ideal for traveling between or communicating with other worlds. It is where Peleus, the first starborn prince who originated from Prithian, and his descendants rested. This is a whole other rabbit hole to go down. I'm going to stop here and simply stick to pointing out these story carvings and how they all tie together in our stories. Makes you wonder if there's more to these sacred mountains than we already know, and I could definitely see us exploring more of their meanings and how these worlds are further connected, with Nesta on her quest to see why she was chosen for the 8-pointed star.